Greetings. Um, I This is my first time going live on YouTube. I actually pre-recorded uh, twice. The first time I made a couple mistakes, and the second time, I was pretty rock solid on that version. But then I was thinking, well, I know what I want to say, and uh, and maybe this will be helpful as I strive to reach the goal to be able to talk more in public and and just the thought that it is live, even though at the moment maybe no one's watching, but still, I feel like I had a lot of uh, success as far as what I learned about myself this week as I strive to meet this goal because I knew that I would have this accountability of having a video blog. I had planned for it to be more daily, at least for the first 7 days, and that there was this 7 day journey that I wanted to accomplish uh, and lose 7 pounds. Uh, that didn't happen, but I did lose 3.75 roughly. So 3 pounds and 12 ounces is what I lost. Uh, and I need to see that as a victory because now I'm at 210. And so the goal and the commitment that I plan on doing is at least having another video blog on the next Saturday or Sunday or whatnot when I really have the time moment to do it, when it's just me and there's no real noise going on in the house with the dogs or the TV going on or going off or whatnot. It's just me. I I feel like I can keep this up and I can progress sooner than later, and I feel like I can progress in a month's time, starting from 7, 8 days ago, to lose 20 pounds. And I think the biggest thing for me is the barrier of that 200 stigma. Uh, if I can get to that, then the next one would be getting below 190. And I feel if I can get past that one, uh, that's when we'll start really seeing my motivation increase. One of the things that I discovered just well in the yesterday and today I actually started it was going back on the treadmill. I first started my runner's journey on the treadmill by just focusing on one single mile of exercise and trying to, even if I had to stop for a second, uh, trying to get it down to that uh, military mile of, I hope I'm getting it right. I think it's 1 mile in 10 in 10 minutes. So it'll be 6 miles in an hour. That's the ideal. Um, and it'll help with my stamina. Right now, I think it's at 12 minutes, and I'm huffing and puffing because I'm not into it. I'm not into it like I was before. Um, it seems like a chore, and as it in the past, because I was so much into it, I did it all the time. And the biggest thing is the terrain here in the east as opposed to in the west. Honestly, because I found it, even though I started on the treadmill, I found it was easier when I was just on the well, it was easier for me as I was able to go outside and do it outside as opposed to uh, uh, doing it indoors. And the challenge too is the fact that I have to have my hands on the rails because the treadmill skips. We had it when it was in storage. It was uh, laying sideways, and that cause I think for it now to just kind of stick or whatnot, and so it's not functioning properly. But I realize that if I lift it to an incline and I just keep holding onto those rails and just trying to bring up that speed to 5 miles, 6 miles per hour, and I do it just for 1 mile. This will help because when I started the exercise regimen, it was before I did the vegan part, and I didn't see a real huge change in the uh, weight loss. But then when I coupled it with the vegan stuff, I really saw it really fast. And I think maybe that's part of it too, is the fact that I'm vegging, not just uh, in eating. I'm also doing it in being stationary. Some of it's the large commute that I do every day, an hour and a half in the morning, 2 hours to 3 hours in the evening. So it's over 4 hours sitting down. I'm an educator, but so much more is going on with the computer and doing computer activities. So I think I'm finding myself sitting down more often. I'm not on my feet as much. I used to moonlight with a second job when I was living out west. So I was on my feet for ridiculous amounts of time, 14, 16 hours, 17 hours. Um, and so I know that might have an effect, obviously, but I really feel like the diet is important, but I need to remember that part of it as well. One of the things I mentioned in the pre-recorded version, I'll just give you the highlights because I don't think it's necessary to mention all of it, but I find that uh, one of the things that help that I think is going to help me is remembering the original diet as far as lemons and other citric fruit, that I need to include that more because I felt like that helped curb some of the wanting to snack. Having something, even if it's just a lemon to suck on, or having that citrus in the middle of the day, um, even though I want to eat more specifically bananas, and even though I believe in the raw vegan element of it, I it's more the idea and the concept of the fruit that I want to emphasize. Budget-wise, you'll find that if you were to really truly, embrace the low-fat raw vegan concept, it can get very expensive very fast. One of the things that people say that helps, and I know that it's true, is to, emphasize bananas. But sometimes when you're going to the store, bananas aren't ripe. So then you go to other things, and sometimes then you start supplementing it with hummus and vegetables, and there you go with the fat again, and it's a lot of it. So, it can be hard. It can be hard to include all of that. So, but bananas is a very inexpensive way to do it. I find that freezing bananas, having them in smoothies, having dried bananas, putting different spices on them, uh, you know, changing the palate up, that's going to help a lot. It's like with man versus food. He can't eat 5 pounds of whatever he's eating unless he has those little condiments on the side where he's dipping it, he's changing it up, making it so it's not boring. And I think that's the conflict there because I think that the raw vegan mono meal fruit type thing is a really good idea, but you're eating like one fruit and that's it. But people that can afford it, they're they're mixing it up every day. I mean, they'll have a mono meal of half of a watermelon, and then they'll have a banana smoothie, and then they'll have a different kind of smoothie. And then, granted, these smoothies don't have milk in them, don't even have almond milk in them. Uh, they're just water, bananas, and if you get the right proportion, it still be very creamy, and then you can mix in some other things, lemon juice, strawberries, whatnot, blend it in, and then you don't have that issue with the water types that is a big concern with why people have the mono meals. But if you mix it in, you can put some kale in, you can have that nice little mix, and it absorbs very well in the system. And that was the other point that I wanted to mention that was mentioned in the pre-recorded version that I was going to submit today, and that was that experience with my father. My father passed away back in 2012, and his uh, his journey, his diet journey. I think at one point earlier on in 2000, he had realized the value of the raw vegan movement, but he perceived the raw vegan movement as being and emphasizing things like broccoli and cauliflower and celery. And he just knew that for himself, and probably just the cruciferousness of those particular foods, that that was not going to function very well for him. And since then, with diets like the 80-10-10 diet, by Dr. Graham, that came out in 2013, a year after he passed away. It kind of clarified that. It made it clear that there's a difference between soluble and insoluble fibers. The insoluble fibers that he was putting into his system, that my dad was putting into his system, even though he didn't eat the cruciferous vegetables as much, he was thinking more grains, and he was thinking fiber and fiber gran, and which is like 6 grams of fiber per serving, and so he was and oatmeal, and he was putting these things that were very hard on the colon, and even though he had quote unquote cancer in his system, he had been fighting it for a while, and I don't think that was it. I feel like now, after everything I've been reading, that it was the colon itself. His colon, as you eat more uh, insoluble fiber, it serves as a fiber brush, which is perceived as a good thing. It clears a lot of the pull-ups that are in your colon and helps you to function uh, better so that everything goes down your system, and that works for a while. But it makes the colon thicker as it does that, as it cleans out everything, and makes it smooth and whatnot. It makes it thicker and thicker. So think of a tube that you have hooked up to a pump, and imagine that the certain length and whatnot, and imagine as it gets thicker, and because it's not going to change in length as that connection to a pump that's pumping through, and it's using that process, it becomes harder and harder for it to pump because the tube is thicker and thicker. The wall of it is thicker and thicker until finally it stops functioning. And this is something that they've studies that have been made that have followed, that were mentioned in the 80-10-10 diet book, that talk about how they've followed whole grain vegans that emphasize the whole grain aspect to the fruit and vegetable aspect. uh, they've they've followed them and found that all they were all having this problem later on. They might live to be a decent age, but they would eventually have um, that issue with the colon not being able to um, push that food through anymore. And when you have a soluble, it dissolves into your system smoother, easier, and it's not the fiber brush concept, because if you ate fruit all day long, and then you supplemented that with leafy greens and vegetables, you get your vitamins and antioxidants from the fruit, and obviously you get your antioxidants from your vegetables and their leafy greens. But the leafy greens would give you those, even the vegetables would give you those minerals, because these are things that are more earthy, come straight from the ground, and have all of that other stuff that have that minerals that you have, and you're getting the calories, not from grains, not from things that are harder on your system to break down, that are harder on your colon. and you're able to to get all the calories in your system. No new polyps will form, at least. Maybe you won't be able to remove all of the polyps that were already formed from eating your carnivorous diet, eating your low fiber diet in the past. But it will just absorb into your system, make it a lot easier. One of the other things he talks about is about diabetes and how that type 2 diabetes, forget about it. It's not going to be a concern for you, and you can also reverse the diabetes that you currently have if being type 2 diabetes. Um, and so some pretty amazing things, and those are things that my dad didn't realize. And with the fruit, he didn't realize that he was afraid of the fruit aspect of it. I mean, his wife is a diabetic, and my mom, and she uh, she eats fruit, I think, on occasion, but I think she emphasizes meat. She's not a vegetarian. Uh, but one of the things that we know from her is that she was really good about avoiding sugars, and she still got diabetes. How? Well, she was still eating meat, still getting that fat intake in there, and she was eating grains and whatnot. And but it was the fat. It was the fat that was the culprit. And that's usually we think sugar first, and then we think salt, but it's the fat that's in your food that messes with the absorption rate in your system, and leads to the type 2 diabetes that it helps. It's a huge contributor, larger than even the sugar. And the other thing to think about is not all sugars are created equal. Uh, and don't take my word for it. Do some research on this. Look at some of the other sources related and connected to the 80-10-10 diet, and you'll find that there is lots of studies that will back this up. That the emphasis needs to be on the fat element of it. Granted, just because I say that doesn't mean you can go low fat and then start eating all the fruit you want. If the doctors have warned you that you shouldn't be doing that for your diabetes, but there are diets out there, many of them vegetarian and vegan, but there's also some that are not, that are also still inclusive of meats, lean meats and whatnot. And those are diets that you can consider that might be best for you. If you're like, I don't know about this vegetarian or veganness, then maybe you should go in that direction. But there are diets out there that will reverse your diabetes in only 9 weeks. 9 weeks. Uh, Doctors giving you insulin, they're just trying to stabilize your current condition. And they're telling you what to avoid to maintain that stabilized condition. They might say, well, hey, we can reverse this, but they don't give you that. They don't. That's not their expertise. They're your family doctor. That's not their area. They're not a nutritionist. And then nutritionists, there's just such a wide range. Such a wide range. Um, and there's many different kinds, and they all have different perceptions. Uh, but I would check this out. I would look this up. And as I do more videos, I'll include more of the information about this. Um, and One of the things with that I've been concerned is that because I'm back to being overweight, obese, um, is is that I'm putting myself at risk for diabetes, especially if I'm genetically prone for it, which I am. Um, I want to find that balance. I want to find that balance where I feel like I'm eating enough. Uh, if I still have to eat grains, so be it. Um, but the grains will be of a fiber intake that would be closer to, uh, you know, 2 grams of fiber for 150 uh, uh, calories per serving of something, that won't be a ridiculous six. It won't work the system that much, and is mm, my my approach in life financially is that changes. I I plan on being able to expand out to all of the different things that are in the raw vegan process and include that more, because that would be ideal. It would be ideal to be in that kind of state of mind. Uh, and I could still mix it up every other day and it would be great. Right now, it's bananas today, bananas tomorrow, bananas next day. And so sometimes that can be hard. And commuting, it can be hard because when you're on a commute, you find that it's hard to stop in the middle, and then, if you go to the gas station or whatnot, then you have to get back in the traffic, and you missed a crucial minute, and now it takes way longer to get to your destination. So leaving early is a problem, uh, uh, sometimes, and when it is, then every minute counts, and I can't be eating something or have something heavy and then you eat fruit in the morning, it absorbs through your system so fast that you have to use the food that you had the day before that's processing too, and easily 2 bowel movements first thing in the morning. One when I get up, but then one when right after the hour and a half commute. But if I had my breakfast early on, then it's going to still it's gonna I'm still gonna have to make that stop. Um, so I'm trying to figure that one out. Maybe getting up early enough that I'm able to drink like a liter of water and have some decent smoothie or fruit or whatnot, and then maybe being able to go to the restroom again and before I leave, that would be helpful. See, one of the things that discourages people from being vegan or raw vegan is because we have a very fibrous diet, whether that be insoluble or soluble. We're going to the restroom for bowel movement 6 times a day. So some people perceive that as a bad thing, or they'll eat kale for the first time, and then they have a you know uh, boom, they have to go to the restroom. Uh, and they see that and they perceive that as a bad thing, and especially if what's being the movement is not as solid as it could be, and I think it's a very common experience for first people first doing it. um, but as it becomes more, you're more used to it, I think the bowel movements are more solid, and sorry for bringing this up as much. This is a very common topic and a very big concern that people have. And as you become more successful and you actually start losing the weight, and now I will see this too, is because right now I think the biggest thing that I'm really actually losing is as I drink more water and whatnot, and there's a water weight that's starting to come off, and that's a lot of it at first. And so when I lose my first 20 pounds, a lot of that could be just water weight, and that's been retained mainly probably because of the sodium intake. And I have been more mindful of the sodium intake. As I'm being more mindful for the sodium intake, there's going to be uh, more water weight loss. But as it gets down to about 180 or whatnot, as I experienced it before, you start seeing little spots on your skin and whatnot, and you're like, "Oh my goodness, what's happening? I'm dying," or whatever. No, what's happening is you're actually burning fat, and not only are you burning fat, you're getting into some of the older fat. the fat that's been on you for a long time, and it has all kinds of toxins and whatnot. And now these are finally being burnt off. The toxins are being released into your system, and so you're getting spots on you, and it's just part of the process. And this is mentioned in 80-10-10. I had experienced it before and had heard that read it elsewhere that, that's just part of it. It's part of it because you're burning fat. But when most people do go on these different journeys, or they stop drinking soda or whatnot, and they lose 8-10 pounds, um, uh, and then they're mindful of their salt and whatnot, they're losing water weight at first. So they might not experience that. And so, but vegan-ness can be a really good approach. I've been a vegan for roughly on and off. When I say on and off, it's been pretty faithful to the vegan aspect of it for the last 7 years. But having said that, I have those that one day a year, like my birthday, where I'll eat real sushi as opposed to my vegan sushi that I make. Uh, and I go to one of those all you can eat places and have those different things. But as an overall, I've been pretty good about it. But why the weight gain? The weight gain because vegan food is not necessarily healthy food. Uh, you know, you still need to be mindful of what's being put in your system. And I think the thing that we have going for us as a people, as a society, is the fact is our is even though obviously we vegans don't agree with food pyramid, the food pyramid and all the different things that have been pushed have actually had a positive effect. I think there is a positive silver lining to the food pyramid being pushed on the youth and whatnot, and that is they're being more conscientious of yes, we do need fruits and vegetables. There does need to be like 4 or 5 servings of fruits and vegetables, and that's not the case, in other places. One of the biggest misconceptions people have with the China study, because people that don't like or are against veganism will bring up the fact that, oh, that's not true. I know for a fact that in China, they do still eat meat and they still do this and they still do that. That's not what the diet was saying. That's not what the book was saying. Sorry, it's not a diet. The book was just bringing up the fact, the study was pointing out that these people have cancer there. Yes. So it's not like, oh, they don't have cancer there. That's wrong because they do. Uh, and the book, the China study, just says that there's no cancer in China and whatnot because they don't eat meat and they don't eat dairy, or and they still get cancer. And well, see, the rural regions of China, and that was one of the biggest focuses because you still have big cities where they have access to the meats and all that. The rural communities, they do rely more on grains and whatnot. They do, on occasion, eat the uh, the meat and the dairy, but it's so heavy on the grains that the amount of dairy that's in their system, the amount of meat that's in their system is so small. They don't have the same types of cancer as we do. Why do they still have cancer? And they not only that, but they have different types of cancer. Well, like I said before, they're emphasizing more grains, and then you have, as far as that part of the world in Asia, specifically the Orient, you have Japan and whatnot. They're eating 75% meat, but mostly like seafood and whatnot. And that's crazy. Yeah, that's very different. That's completely past our perception of what we see as a whole, as a people, not just any particular group. I mean, I think most Americans, most American parents, whether they're vegetarians or not, are very aware of the fact that they need to make sure that their kids have plenty of fruits and vegetables, grains. Uh, of course, they well, a lot of America still believes that milk does a body good, especially when you're young, and so there's all that, but the balance is different. So their cancers are going to be different. Their emphasis is on different things. So and then you have like Japan where it's heavy in the meats and whatnot. It's even more of a challenge in some things. Uh, but that is what the China study was actually pointing out was what you could learn from that. You could learn that we can avoid uh, prostate cancer because they clearly avoided it by not eating as much meat, not eating as much dairy. So you can walk away from reading the China study and say, I want to maintain my diet, but I learned something here that I can have more moderation. Now, granted, this is a male concern. Uh, there are things that have been brought up, and things like forks over knives, which also gives mention to the China study, but it also gives mention to just the idea that of how vegetarian can help uh, women and how that during World War II and the Great Depression, there was a lot of rationing during World War II for uh, access to meat and whatnot. And so people were eating very little meat and they were relying more on grains and other things. And breast cancer in the United States went down to pretty much nothing. And it was because of that rationing. So these are things to consider. Um, and I feel like even though I failed in excluding from oil completely, my mind kept reminding myself, okay, I need to not add salt. I think for the most part I didn't to things. I added other things like potassium, salt, and whatnot. And also, when I used the oils, I would use the canola oil because it has no saturated fat in it. Um, so I'm not quite back to the mindset that I think I might have started on when I used to buy the Ezekiel bread and there was a Sprouts that I could go to that actually sold the tortilla that I used, which had a non-oil tortilla, because it was also Ezekiel, and their breads they don't use oil, and I like that. I like that. I like the idea of not having any oil in it at all, and they have a low sodium bread as well, and I used to have that, and I think it was closer to $4 now. I see it around here. I see it for $6 at different places. They don't have the tortillas. Um, and so, that was back when I was eating that whole grain element. And there are aspects of it that I think functioned better for me for a long time. But as I mentioned, some of the things about the colon, I'm not going to completely ignore that. I think I would have more energy if I could be on a 100% raw vegan diet. That'd be ideal, but it's not. So I'm eating frozen vegetables. I'm eating frozen fruit. I'm eating dry fruit. I'm drying it myself. And so it's way less expensive when I do that. Um, I'm trying to rely heavily on the bananas as much as I can. I think if I get up earlier, I think it will help. If I get up at 3:45, uh, maybe even include a mile on the treadmill. Then uh, take care of everything else that I need to take care of. Maybe eat, drinks a liter of water. Eat some fruit, and if I do it early enough, then I can then go to the restroom again before I leave, and I can have food in my stomach then, and then try to have something small, maybe a single banana or lemon or whatnot, something at lunch in the middle, so that when I'm getting back on that road, I don't stop at that gas station and buy that vegan friendly bag of potato chips that still is fatty and it still has the salt and has no fiber. Uh, and I really think that if I commit to just doing a video once a week at least, then I think we'll be in good shape. And even though I know there's no one watching right now, this is a good practice for me, being live, being able to think, I don't have to uh, think about doing several takes, even though I got to do a couple takes before I started here. But is I think I might try this again and might not, do any pre-takes and just kind of go candid a little bit. And as people go back and look at the videos and see, oh wow, this is actually helping him, and is and I think that that would be the biggest thing. um, I'm reminded of something that my uh, father said, and my wife was trying to record him giving advice to me and what advice he would give his grandchildren, which I don't have any kids. We don't have any kids, but the future kids that we might have. What would be the one thing that he would tell us? And we were expecting some, intellectual, philosophical advice, not necessarily about diet or whatnot. And but that's what he brought up. He said he would want that his grandkids and the future generations to progress in this vegan lifestyle. That there's something there that it will that it that that's beneficial for for longevity, for the quality of one's life. And granted, there's like I said, there's a lot of things that you can eat that are very bad for you. But if you kind of focus on the benefits of the soluble fiber, but in the benefits of, more importantly, of getting the actual energy in your system and getting it sooner than later, and that not all sugars are created equal. Sugars from fruit, it's not the same as the sugars that you get from burning simple carbs, uh, all grains and whatnot, and uh, and there's all of the antioxidants and the vitamins that you get from them, and the minerals that you get from the leafy greens. Just amazing, amazing, and just being on a vegan diet, even though I am obese, I feel better. I feel better. I do need to exercise more often and whatnot, but I feel better than I did when I didn't, when I wasn't on this vegan diet, because the veganism has limited the amount of times I get sick every year to one time, sometimes it closer to zero. I work with kids, and they always say that's the first year is the hardest, and it was. It was. This was long before I was a vegan, and it was hard, and it took like a year until I think I built up an immunity, but I still got sick like 4 or 5 times, but it wasn't as bad as it was the very first year. It felt like it was one continuous illness of sinus infections and whatnot. And I remember that the doctor would tell me to ease up on the dairy while I was on the antibiotic, of course, and or when I was sick. And it happened enough times that I started playing with that even long before I discovered veganism for myself. I I played with that and stopped eating dairy. I would still eat meat, but I ate more pastas and whatnot. Not the best kind of pastas, but I did that, and I found that it It helped. It helped. I was not getting sick as often. I wasn't consistent with it because I wasn't consistent with the diet. But I didn't eat out a lot, so it was mostly whatever I had at home, and I just didn't keep dairy there. And I'd eat other kinds of things. I would focus on breaded meats or other stuff for what my calories. But I ate a lot of pasta, and I could eat it with tomato sauce or whatnot, and I didn't have that dairy a lot, and I felt better. And so when it came along, it was an easy switch when I once I started, getting into these places like Whole Foods and Sprouts and buying foods. I did start with like eating the special meats that didn't have all the additives in them, that you would get and cage-free eggs and whatnot, all that stuff that you would get at one of those Whole Food places. And I tried that, see how it made me feel. And this is when I started doing the running and whatnot, and then they had all of these, vegan cheeses, and I tried those, and then for, like, a small little period in early November, I wanna say the 17th, maybe it was the 21st of November, 2011, I went for, like, 4 days, 5 days, and then I saw a weight loss that was like, boom, 6 pounds, and I was like, "Wow." And, and uh, and that was the starting point. And I really saw a change, just not just in the weight loss, but then once I was consistent with avoiding dairy, I felt so much better. And so even though I've been eating fatty foods and not being so considerate of of the activity levels because I'm sitting down in a car for 4 hours every day and sitting down more often than before. Uh, I find that it's so beneficial that I'm on just a vegan diet. And I think that some of the things that you feel when you're on like an Atkins diet, there's an energy surge that you have. But even though Atkins is not something that's sustainable. And I was on Atkins. I lost a lot of weight, pretty much almost as much weight as I lost when I was when I first started the vegan diet, which is like 50 pounds. And so I had a lot of success at first with Atkins, but I couldn't maintain it because your sodium levels are high, even though you're burning meat, and that's and in your system and burning the fat and whatnot. Uh, your abdomen after like 6 months of doing that gets really tight, and there's other issues and concerns that there might be bladder stones, and there was all kinds of things, and so I just backed off of that, and I gained the weight back until I discovered this diet, and things change, life changes. You go, your workplace changes, the commute changes, the environment, the climate, and I just need to find a new balance for myself. And this video blogging is a good commitment because I don't want to go back to above 210. I want to go down, and having this commitment will be helpful to me. And I'm going to leave you here. This is a pretty long recording, 43 minutes. Oh my goodness. Um, Thank you so much for your time.